Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when Ricky Gervais, the comedian known for tearing apart Hollywood with his razor-sharp tongue, sits across from Stephen Colbert on The Late Show to debate whether national holidays should honor seniors more for their contributions to history? At first, it seemed like a lighthearted discussion, a blend of jokes, anecdotes, and the usual late-night banter. Colbert opened with his signature charm, poking fun at Ricky's reputation for being anti-tradition. The audience laughed, Ricky smirked, and everything felt like business as usual. But beneath the laughter, a storm was brewing. Ricky dismissed the idea of dedicating holidays to seniors as sentimental nonsense, while Colbert fired back that ignoring the people who built the world we live in is a moral failure. What started as comedy quickly spiraled into one of the tensest debates ever aired on late-night TV. The audience gasped, cheered, and at times sat in stunned silence as the two men clashed, Ricky with his biting cynicism, Colbert with his passionate defense of tradition and respect. And then, in a shocking turn, Ricky Gervais pushed back his chair, delivered one final cutting remark, and stormed off the set, leaving Colbert, the audience, and millions watching at home in utter disbelief. This wasn't just an interview, it was a cultural earthquake. The lights of The Late Show blazed down on a polished mahogany desk, the signature city skyline glowing in the backdrop. Stephen Colbert, suit crisp, tie slightly loosened for his trademark laid-back style, leaned forward with that mischievous glint in his eye. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to thunderous applause, "my next guest has insulted more celebrities than I've interviewed in the last decade. Please welcome Ricky Gervais." The audience erupted, cheering, clapping, some even standing as Ricky Gervais strolled onto the stage. His walk was casual, almost lazy, with that familiar grin plastered across his face like he had already thought of a dozen jokes he wasn't supposed to say. He shook Stephen's hand, waved at the audience, then plopped into his chair with a smirk. Stephen grinned. "So, Ricky, I have to ask, did you come here to cause trouble, or is that just your natural state?" Ricky leaned back, spreading his arms wide. "Stephen, you know me. I never cause trouble. I just tell the truth. If people can't handle it, that's their problem." The audience laughed, some clapping. Stephen chuckled, shaking his head. "That's exactly what someone who causes trouble would say." The banter rolled easily at first, Colbert tossing playful jabs, Ricky countering with dry wit. The audience roared with laughter, enjoying the sparring match. Then Stephen leaned in, his smile still there, but his tone sharpening slightly. "Now, Ricky, I wanted to bring you on tonight because we're discussing a big idea, something about national identity, culture, and history. The question is, should national holidays focus more on celebrating the contributions of seniors to history? After all, these are the people who paved the roads, fought the wars, built the institutions. Don't they deserve their day?" The audience applauded warmly, nodding. Colbert's delivery carried both humor and sincerity, clearly setting the stage for something more than just comedy. Ricky raised his eyebrows, his smirk widening. "Ah, here we go. Look, Stephen, I love seniors. I do. They've given us, bingo, Werther's Originals, and the fine art of complaining about young people. But do we really need another day off work just so politicians can pat themselves on the back for caring about the elderly?" The audience gasped, then burst into laughter. A few clapped, others murmured nervously, sensing the first crack of tension. Stephen chuckled but shook his head. "Come on, Ricky, that's unfair. We celebrate presidents, we celebrate labor, we celebrate independence. Why not set aside a day to honor the generations that literally carried us here?" Ricky snorted. "Because every day is already Senior Day. Look around. You can't walk into a diner at 4 p.m. without half the tables filled with pensioners eating discounted meatloaf. You want to honor them? Fine, let them cut the line at Starbucks. But don't hijack a national holiday for that. The audience erupted again, half laughing, half groaning. Stephen held up a hand, trying to rein things in. So wait, you're saying the people who built the bridges, defended the country, raised families through wars and depressions, they don't deserve the same recognition as, say, fireworks or pumpkin pie? Ricky leaned forward, deadpan. Exactly. Fireworks never complain about their hips. The audience roared with laughter, but underneath, the studio felt the shift. The jokes were landing, but the stakes were rising. Colbert's smile remained, but there was an edge now. Ricky, I get it. You think it's all sentimental fluff, but I think it's about gratitude. Without seniors, there is no history. Without them, there is no us. And maybe, just maybe, a holiday reminding us of that wouldn't kill anyone. The audience applauded, a strong wave of support. Ricky raised his hands in mock surrender, grinning. All right, fair point. But if we do this, then I demand a National Comedians' Day too. We've done just as much for civilization as Grandma's knitting club. The crowd laughed, but the split in the room was obvious now. Some were still with Ricky's irreverent humor, others were nodding firmly at Colbert's defense of honoring seniors. What began as playful banter was starting to feel like a real battleground, with the audience caught between laughter and moral agreement. And though Ricky was smiling, the glint in his eyes made it clear he wasn't done yet.
The laughter from Ricky's last jab still echoed, but Stephen Colbert leaned forward, clasping his hands together with a look that meant business. His voice softened, but his words cut sharper. You joke, Ricky, but what you're really saying is that people who've spent their entire lives shaping the world don't deserve recognition? That's not comedy. That's cruelty, dressed up as cynicism. The audience applauded, some even whistling. Ricky tilted his head, pretending to look wounded. Cruelty, please. I'm British. Sarcasm is our love language. The audience burst into laughter again, but Stephen didn't crack. He pressed on. I'll tell you what's not funny. My mother, God rest her soul, working 2 jobs in the 60s just to put food on the table. Or my grandfather, who came back from World War II and helped build the highways we all drive on. These people bled and broke their backs so we could sit here, comfortable, debating whether they matter enough for a holiday. The room erupted in applause, the sincerity of Colbert's words striking a chord. Even Whoopi Goldberg, sitting off to the side as a guest panelist for the night, nodded in agreement. Ricky smirked, but his tone shifted slightly, less playful, more biting. And what did the government give your grandfather, Stephen? A parade, maybe a medal. Great. Did that stop him from working until his knees gave out? Did it pay the medical bills? No. Because you don't fix problems with holidays. You fix them with policies. If you care about seniors, give them health care. Give them dignity, not a bloody day off where banks close early. The audience gasped, then broke into scattered applause. Some even shouted, "He's right." Colbert leaned back in his chair, his smile tight, but his voice steady. So your argument is that because the government doesn't do enough, we shouldn't even symbolically honor seniors? Ricky, that's not logic. That's giving up. Ricky leaned forward now, his hands gesturing sharply, his voice cutting through the studio. No, Stephen, it's reality. Symbols are easy. Politicians love holidays because they cost nothing. You know what costs something? Actually respecting seniors with real action. But we don't do that, do we? We give them a cheap card, a thanks for your service, and then we move on. It's performative nonsense. The crowd erupted again, divided, cheers, boos, claps, and groans, all colliding in a chaotic wave. Colbert raised his hand, trying to calm the storm. His voice hardened. So what, you'd rather do nothing? You'd rather erase seniors from the calendar altogether? Ricky fired back instantly. I'd rather stop pretending. Pretending we care once a year doesn't fix the fact that the rest of the year seniors are ignored. That put in nursing homes no one visits, left to rot while politicians tweet about how much they love our elders. It's hypocrisy, Stephen, and I won't clap along for it. The studio fell into stunned silence for a beat before the audience erupted again. Half cheering, half booing, the tension had boiled over from playful banter to a full-blown ideological clash. Whoopi raised an eyebrow, breaking her silence. You know, Ricky, I get where you're coming from. But here's the thing. Holidays aren't meant to solve problems. They're meant to remind us. Remind us of who we are, where we came from, and what we owe. Without that, people forget. And when people forget, they stop caring. The audience applauded, nodding at her words. Ricky chuckled darkly. Or maybe they clap, say, never forget, and then go right back to forgetting the second Monday morning hits. Colbert shook his head, smiling grimly. You're relentless, Ricky. But let me ask you this. If one of your loved ones, your parents, your grandparents, were honored with a national holiday, wouldn't you feel pride? Wouldn't you feel gratitude that the country recognized their contribution? Ricky froze for a moment, his smirk faltering just slightly. The camera caught it, the brief crack in his armor. He leaned back, crossing his arms before replying flatly, Maybe, but it wouldn't change what they went through. The audience murmured, sensing the tension deepen. Colbert pounced gently. Maybe not, but it might change what future generations remember about them. That's the point. We don't do it for the dead, we do it for the living. So the lessons, the sacrifices aren't lost. The crowd applauded again, this time more firmly on Colbert's side. Ricky's jaw tightened, and he leaned in once more, his voice sharp. Or maybe it's just a performance, a distraction so we don't feel guilty about how badly we treat the elderly the other 364 days a year. The audience erupted, gasps, scattered applause, some even booing. And for the first time, the laughter that had marked Ricky's presence seemed almost completely gone. The debate had stopped being funny. It had become personal.
The studio was restless. The applause from Stephen's words still lingered, but Ricky's retort about performative holidays had cut deep. The audience wasn't laughing anymore. They were waiting. Stephen leaned forward, eyes narrowing, but voice softening. You talk about hypocrisy, Ricky, about performance. But let me ask you this. What exactly is your stake in this? Why does this idea make you so angry? Ricky shifted in his chair, crossing his arms as if to shield himself. His smirk faltered for the briefest second. Because I've seen it up close, Stephen. I've seen the nonsense for what it is. The audience quieted, sensing something real was about to break through. Ricky exhaled sharply, then leaned into the mic, his voice gravelly, stripped of humor. My dad. He worked in construction for 40 years, worked himself to the bone. By the time he was 65, his body was broken. Arthritis, bad back, lungs shot from years of dust and smoke. And do you know what he got? A handshake and a cheap gold watch. That's it. Then he spent the next 15 years barely able to walk, while politicians gave speeches about honoring the working man. It was a bloody joke. Gasps and murmurs swept across the audience. Ricky's eyes glistened for a fraction of a second before he blinked it away. He pressed on. My mom, God bless her, took care of him every single day. No holiday honored her, no government thanked her. And then, when she passed, all they gave me was a pamphlet about grief counseling. That's why I get angry, Stephen. Because I've seen what honor looks like. It's words, empty, cheap words, and I don't buy it. The room was dead silent. Not a cough, not a shuffle. Even the cameras seemed to zoom in tighter, as if the studio itself leaned closer. Stephen sat still for a moment, his usual smirk replaced with quiet empathy. He nodded slowly. "I hear that, Ricky, and I respect it. But let me tell you my story." The audience perked up. Stephen rarely got this personal on air. "My grandfather came back from the war with nothing but scars. He worked as a laborer too, railroads, factories, anything that paid. He never asked for thanks. But when the town named a day after the veterans, do you know what it did? It gave him dignity. For one day, he wasn't invisible. For one day, he wasn't just another broken man struggling to make rent. He was someone people looked up to. And you know what that did? It made me proud. It reminded me that his sacrifice mattered." The audience broke into applause, many standing, clapping slowly at first, then louder. Stephen leaned closer, his voice trembling with sincerity. "So maybe you're right. Maybe the system is broken. Maybe seniors deserve more than ceremonies and speeches, but don't you dare tell me that honoring them doesn't matter. Because to the families left behind, to the children watching, it matters more than you can imagine." Ricky sat back, his lips pressed together, jaw tight. The weight of Stephen's story seemed to hit him, though he fought to mask it with a wry grin. "Touching," Ricky muttered, his tone half-hearted. "But you don't fix broken bones with parades." "Maybe not," Stephen countered quickly. "But you fix broken spirits, and sometimes that's the difference between being forgotten and being remembered." The audience erupted again, cheers, claps, even whistles. Ricky finally leaned forward, his voice quieter now, almost vulnerable. "Maybe. But watching my dad die bitter, watching my mum get ignored, I can't unsee that. And I'll never believe a holiday would have made them feel less abandoned." The audience sat in stunned silence. For the first time, Ricky's cynicism felt less like comedy and more like confession. Whoopi, who had been watching silently, finally spoke. Her voice was low, gentle. "Ricky, maybe that's exactly why we need it. So people like your dad, your mum, they aren't forgotten. So people remember, even if it's just once a year." The audience murmured in agreement, some nodding, others clapping softly. Ricky didn't reply right away. He sat there, staring at the desk, his fingers drumming lightly against the wood. The comedian who had laughed at everything suddenly seemed weighed down by something heavier than even his sharpest punchlines could deflect. The tension in the room was palpable, a raw mix of grief, respect, and defiance.
For the first time, it didn't feel like a talk show. It felt like a reckoning. The silence that lingered after Ricky's confession was fragile, almost sacred, but it didn't last. Stephen Colbert straightened in his chair, his voice calm but steely. "Ricky," he said, "I respect your pain, I really do, but anger isn't an excuse to dismiss everyone else's story. For every father who died bitter, there's a grandfather who died proud because his country did honor him. You can't erase that." The audience applauded loudly, sensing Stephen reclaiming the momentum. Ricky's jaw tightened, and he leaned forward, his voice sharper now. "I'm not erasing anything, Stephen. I'm exposing the lie. You wrap people in warm words while their real struggles go unanswered. That's worse than doing nothing. It's insulting." The studio rippled with gasps. A woman in the audience shouted, "He's right!" while another booed loudly. The split was tangible, the energy volatile. Stephen pressed, his tone rising. "So your solution is cynicism. Mock every tradition, dismiss every symbol, and call it honesty? That's not bravery, Ricky. That's bitterness." The words hit hard, and the audience audibly reacted, gasps followed by scattered applause. Ricky shot back instantly. "And what's your solution, Stephen? Clap louder? Pretend harder? You think a national holiday changes reality? It's theater. And you're part of it, selling feel-good illusions while people rot in care homes. You're not honoring them, you're entertaining yourself." The audience erupted, half cheering wildly, half booing, all in disbelief. Stephen, usually unflappable, leaned forward, his face taut. "Entertaining myself? Ricky, you're sitting on this stage because people care about what you say. And right now, what you're saying is that respect doesn't matter, that gratitude doesn't matter, that honoring our elders is pointless. Well, let me tell you, it's not pointless to the millions of families who want to remember." The applause thundered, nearly drowning him out. Ricky snapped back, his voice rising, raw and unfiltered. "And let me tell you, those families you speak of, they don't need a holiday to remember their loved ones. They already do. You know who needs the holiday? The politicians, the corporations, the PR machines that love plastering old faces on posters while ignoring them in reality. That's who benefits, not the seniors, not the dead, not anyone real." The audience gasped so loudly it was almost a collective scream. Colbert, visibly frustrated now, raised his voice. "So what then? We do nothing? We bury their sacrifices with them and move on because Ricky Gervais says honoring them is a lie?" The air crackled. Ricky's face hardened, his eyes narrowing as his voice dropped into a dangerous calm. "Better no holiday at all than a fake one. Better silence than lies." The crowd roared, cheers, boos, whistles all colliding in a deafening storm. Some stood clapping in support of Ricky's raw honesty. Others shook their heads angrily, shouting back at him. Stephen shook his head, sighing, but his words cut sharp. "You're not being honest, Ricky. You're hiding. Behind jokes, behind cynicism, behind anger, because it's easier to sneer than to admit that honoring people, even symbolically, might mean something. But if you can't see that, maybe you've lost touch with what actually matters." The audience erupted in applause, a wave of support crashing behind him. That was the moment Ricky snapped. He pushed back his chair so abruptly it screeched against the floor. The sound cut through the studio, silencing the chaos. He stood, his face flushed, his voice shaking with fury. "You know what, Ricky?" he spat. "You can keep your cheap parades and your sentimental speeches. I've lived long enough to know the truth, and I won't sit here and pretend just to make your audience clap." The audience gasped, stunned. Some shouted, "Don't go," while others clapped at his defiance. Stephen tried to interject, holding up his hands. "Ricky, come on!" But Ricky was already walking. He snatched his water glass, set it down with a thud, and stormed toward the side of the stage. The camera struggled to follow as the audience exploded, half cheering, half booing, all in disbelief. And just like that, Ricky Gervais was gone. The walk-off wasn't scripted, wasn't staged. It was raw, shocking, and electric, the kind of moment that would dominate headlines, Twitter feeds, and YouTube replays for weeks to come. The set of The Late Show had just witnessed history, and the shockwaves were only beginning.
The studio was buzzing like a hive after Ricky's walk-off. The echoes of his chair screeching across the stage still hung in the air, mixing with gasps, scattered applause, and stunned murmurings. Some audience members sat frozen, mouths open, while others leaned into one another, whispering, "Did that really just happen?" Stephen Colbert, ever the professional, exhaled slowly, smoothing his tie as the camera stayed locked on him. For a brief second, his face betrayed a flicker of frustration, but he quickly replaced it with a measured smile. "Well," he said dryly, drawing a nervous laugh from the audience, "I think it's safe to say Ricky Gervais does not want a National Seniors Day." The crowd chuckled, grateful for the levity, but the tension still pulsed beneath the laughter. Whoopi Goldberg, sitting nearby, leaned toward Stephen and murmured into her mic, "You know, sometimes the truth comes out loudest in the storm." The audience applauded softly, the words sinking in. The rest of the show carried on, But the atmosphere never fully recovered. Ricky's abrupt exit had left a void, a sense that something unscripted and seismic had just occurred. By the next morning, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Headlines screamed, "Ricky Gervais walks out on Colbert," and "The debate that broke the Late Show." Twitter and TikTok exploded with divided reactions. One viral tweet read, "Ricky's right. Politicians love cheap symbolism while seniors rot in silence." Another countered, "Colbert destroyed him. Holidays matter. Respect matters." Hashtags like Ricky versus Colbert, Senior Day Debate, and Walk-Off Moment trended for 48 hours straight. Talk radio and podcasts dissected every line. Some praised Ricky's brutal honesty, calling him a truth-teller unafraid to puncture the balloon of performative politics. Others condemned him, accusing him of cruelty, insensitivity, and even disrespecting his own parents' legacy. Stephen Colbert addressed the moment briefly the following night. He said to his audience, "Look, Ricky and I may disagree, but that's the beauty of conversation. Sometimes it gets messy, sometimes it hurts, but it matters." The crowd applauded, appreciating the grace. Ricky, for his part, remained unapologetic. In a tweet that racked up millions of views, he wrote, "Walked off Colbert's set because I won't clap for lies. Seniors deserve dignity, not parades. End of story." The tweet sparked another wave of debate, further cementing the clash as one of the most memorable late-night moments of the decade. But beyond the noise, beyond the memes and hashtags, there was something deeper at play. Ricky's rage and Stephen's defense had forced millions of viewers to confront a question most avoid. Do we truly honor our elders, or do we pacify them with symbols while ignoring their struggles? In living rooms across America, families found themselves talking, sometimes arguing, about parents, grandparents, and what it means to remember. And though Ricky's walk-off had seemed like a storm of bitterness in the moment, its legacy was undeniable. It had made people think. It had made people feel. It had made people remember.